On April 14th, 1905, in the parlor of a home in Boston, Massachusetts, a photographer named Thomas Wright took a portrait of 7-year-old Mary Parker holding her cherished porcelain doll. In the photograph, Mary sits carefully cradling the doll in her arms, both Mary and the doll wearing matching white dresses, a sweet Victorian portrait of a girl and her favorite toy. The doll had been given to Mary 2 years earlier, in 1903, after the death of her older sister Elizabeth, from what the family called a sudden fever. The doll, which had belonged to Elizabeth, became Mary's most treasured possession, a connection to the sister she'd lost. For 114 years, the Parker family preserved this photograph as a touching memorial, a bereaved child holding her dead sister's doll, finding comfort in a toy that kept Elizabeth's memory alive. Until 2019, when antique doll collector Dr. Rebecca Morrison purchased the photograph at an estate sale in Boston and had it restored at 20,000% magnification. What Dr. Morrison discovered was horrifying. The doll in Mary's arms had a small tear in its fabric body, barely visible in the original photograph. But at extreme magnification, through that tear, something was visible inside the doll, a tiny photograph, folded and hidden within the doll's stuffing. When researchers carefully extracted and examined that hidden photograph, they found it showed Elizabeth Parker. But Elizabeth's face in the hidden photo showed something the family had never mentioned: petechiae around her eyes and bruising on her neck, the medical signs of asphyxiation. Elizabeth hadn't died of fever. Elizabeth had been smothered, and someone had hidden her photograph inside a doll, sealing evidence of murder in a child's toy for 114 years. Subscribe now, because this is the story of a photograph that seemed adorable, and the Victorian memorial doll that contained evidence of infanticide. Mary Parker was born on June 3, 1898, in Boston, Massachusetts, to Robert and Sarah Parker. Robert worked as a clerk at a shipping company office in Boston Harbor, Sarah as a seamstress working from home. The family lived in a modest wooden house in the Roxbury neighborhood, a working-class area of Boston. Mary had an older sister, Elizabeth, born in 1894. The two sisters were close despite their 4-year age difference. Elizabeth was described in family letters as bright, energetic, sometimes headstrong, a spirited child who could be challenging for her mother. Sarah Parker's letters to her own mother in Hartford, Connecticut, preserved in family archives, documented tension between Sarah and Elizabeth. March 1902. Elizabeth defies me constantly. She refuses her lessons, talks back, disturbs the household. I am at my wit's end with her behavior. July 1902. Elizabeth has become increasingly difficult. Robert says I am too harsh with her, but he does not see her defiance when he is at work. The child exhausts me. November 1902. Elizabeth's behavior worsens. I have tried discipline, but nothing works. She is 8 years old and should be obedient. I fear she will grow into an unmanageable woman. These letters reveal Sarah's frustration with Elizabeth's strong-willed personality, a personality that Victorian American parenting advice viewed as problematic, especially in girls who were expected to be docile and obedient. On March 15, 1903, Elizabeth Parker died suddenly. The death certificate, examined in 2019, stated, "Cause of death, acute fever of unknown origin." Dr. Henry Morrison, the family physician who signed the death certificate, noted in his records, preserved at the Boston Medical Library, called to Parker residence morning of March 15, 1903, found Elizabeth Parker, age 9, deceased in bed. Mother states child had fever during night and was found unresponsive this morning. No obvious signs of illness observed during my previous visits to the family. Cause appears to be sudden fever. Death certificate issued. The family held a funeral on March 18, 1903. Elizabeth was buried at Forest Hills Cemetery in Boston. Family letters describe the event as devastating, particularly for Mary, who was 4 years old and couldn't understand why her sister wouldn't wake up. After Elizabeth's death, Sarah Parker gave Elizabeth's favorite possession, a porcelain doll with a cloth body, approximately 15 inches tall, wearing a white dress, to Mary. Sarah told Mary that the doll was a special gift from Elizabeth, that Elizabeth wanted Mary to have it, that it would help Mary remember her sister. Mary treasured the doll. She carried it everywhere, slept with it, talked to it. The doll became her constant companion and her connection to Elizabeth. In April 1905, 2 years after Elizabeth's death, the Parker family commissioned a photograph of Mary with the doll. Sarah wanted to commemorate Mary's devotion to her sister's memory. The photographer, Thomas Wright, came to the Parker home and took the portrait. Mary, age 7, sitting carefully holding the doll, both wearing white dresses. The photograph shows Mary looking seriously at the camera, holding the doll protectively against her chest. The doll's porcelain face is visible, with painted features and glass eyes. The doll's cloth body, dressed in white, appears intact. But there was something hidden inside that cloth body, something Sarah Parker had placed there 2 years earlier, shortly after Elizabeth's death. Something that would remain hidden for 114 years, until modern technology revealed what Victorian American families had concealed: evidence of a crime that had never been investigated. Elizabeth Parker's death in 1903, attributed to sudden fever, was not unusual for turn-of-the-century America. Sudden fever was a common cause of death listed on death certificates for children, covering a multitude of actual causes, some natural, some not. Victorian American infant and child mortality was high. Approximately 15 to 20% of children died before age 5 from infectious diseases, malnutrition, accidents, and other causes. Deaths of older children, ages 5 to 12, were less common but still occurred regularly. Doctors in the early 1900s had limited diagnostic tools. When a child died suddenly, especially if found dead in the morning after being put to bed the previous night, doctors often attributed death to fever, convulsions, or unknown illness, essentially admitting they didn't know the cause but needed to provide something for the death certificate. This lack of diagnostic precision created opportunities for infanticide and child murder to go undetected. Victorian American infanticide, the deliberate killing of infants and children, occurred more frequently than official records suggested. Historians estimate that many deaths attributed to overlaying, accidental suffocation when a parent rolled onto a baby while sleeping, sudden illness, or failure to thrive were actually cases of deliberate killing or severe neglect. Motivations for Victorian American infanticide included unwanted children, particularly illegitimate births, economic hardship, unable to feed another child, mental illness in the parent, postpartum depression, psychosis, frustration with difficult children, as Sarah's letters suggested about Elizabeth, relief from caregiving burden. The method most commonly used was suffocation, smothering the child with a pillow or by hand, or overlaying. This method left minimal physical evidence, especially if the body wasn't examined immediately or carefully. Signs of asphyxiation that a careful medical examiner might notice include petechiae, small red or purple spots caused by broken capillaries, around the eyes, face, or neck, bruising on the neck or face, bleeding from nose or mouth, cyanosis, blue or purple discoloration of skin. But in 1903, most family doctors didn't conduct thorough post-mortem examinations, especially for children in working-class families. If a parent said the child had fever and died during the night, and there were no obvious signs of violence, the doctor typically accepted that explanation and issued a death certificate accordingly. Prosecution for infanticide was rare. Even when suspected, authorities were reluctant to charge mothers. There was sympathy for women struggling with poverty, mental illness, or difficult circumstances. Convictions required clear evidence, which was often impossible to obtain. The result was that many cases of infanticide went undetected and unpunished. Mothers who'd killed their children often carried the secret for life, telling family and community that the child had died of illness. Sarah Parker's letters suggest she found Elizabeth difficult and exhausting. The phrase, "I am at my wit's end," appears repeatedly. Sarah was caring for 2 young children while doing home sewing work to supplement family income. She had little support and no understanding of child development or mental health. Did Sarah snap one night? Did she smother Elizabeth in a moment of rage or desperation? Did she rationalize it as necessary or justified? For 114 years, nobody asked these questions. Elizabeth's death was accepted as natural, a tragic but not suspicious loss. Until 2019, when a photograph revealed evidence that had been hidden in plain sight inside a child's doll, waiting to tell the truth. The photograph of Mary Parker with Elizabeth's doll, taken on April 14, 1905, appears at first glance to be a sweet Victorian portrait. Mary sits on a chair, dressed in a white dress with lace trim. She holds the doll carefully in her arms, cradling it against her chest. The doll, approximately 15 inches tall, has a porcelain head with painted features, rosy cheeks, red lips, glass eyes, and a cloth body dressed in a miniature white dress matching Mary's. Mary's expression is serious but tender. She looks at the camera with the solemn face common in Victorian children's portraits, but her hands hold the doll gently, lovingly. The photograph captures a moment of childhood devotion, a girl and her cherished toy. For 114 years, the photograph was viewed exactly that way, a memorial to sisterly love, showing a bereaved child finding comfort in her dead sister's doll. The photograph passed through the Parker family over generations. Mary Parker married in 1920, had 2 children, and died in 1978 at age 80. Her daughter kept the photograph. Eventually, it ended up in an estate sale in Boston in 2019 after Mary's last living descendant died without heirs. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, an antique doll collector and historian based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, purchased a box of Victorian photographs and ephemera at the estate sale. Among the items was Mary's 1905 photograph. Dr. Morrison was drawn to it because it showed a particularly beautiful Victorian doll, the type of collectible doll she specialized in. Dr. Morrison decided to have the photograph digitally restored to create a high-quality image for her doll history research. She contracted with a photo restoration specialist in Boston, who scanned the photograph at 15,000 dpi. At high magnification, approximately 20,000%, examining the doll in Mary's arms, the restoration specialist noticed something unusual. The doll's cloth body had a small tear, approximately 5 millimeters long, on the left side near the waist. The tear was barely visible at normal viewing. It looked like a shadow or wrinkle in the fabric. But at extreme magnification, through the tear, something was visible inside the doll. A small piece of paper or cardboard, appearing to be folded multiple times, with what looked like printed or photographic imagery on it. The specialist contacted Dr. Morrison. "There's something inside the doll in your photograph. It looks like there might be a picture or document stuffed inside the body." Dr. Morrison was intrigued. Victorian memorial dolls sometimes contained locks of hair from deceased loved ones, small notes, or other mementos. But photographs were rare. They were too valuable and fragile to hide inside toys. Dr. Morrison researched the photograph's provenance. Through the estate sale documentation, she traced it back to Mary Parker, born 1898, died 1978, Boston. She found Mary's family tree. Sister Elizabeth, born 1894, died 1903 at age 9. The doll in the photograph had belonged to Elizabeth and was given to Mary after Elizabeth's death. And apparently, something had been hidden inside it, something involving a photograph. Dr. Morrison contacted the Parker family through genealogical research. She found a distant Parker relative, James Parker, a great-great-nephew of Elizabeth and Mary living in Newton, Massachusetts, and explained what she'd discovered. James was stunned. He'd never heard of any photograph hidden in a doll. But he agreed to meet Dr. Morrison to discuss the family history. What they uncovered would reveal a crime that had been concealed for 114 years, hidden inside a Victorian child's toy. After Dr. Rebecca Morrison identified something hidden inside the doll in Mary's 1905 photograph, she worked with James Parker to locate the actual doll. The doll had been passed down through Mary's family. After Mary died in 1978, the doll went to her daughter, then to her granddaughter. When the last descendant died in 2018, the doll was donated to a local charity shop in Boston, which sold it to a private collector. Through extensive searching, Dr. Morrison located the collector, a woman in Brookline, Massachusetts, who'd purchased the doll in 2018 and kept it in her Victorian doll collection. Dr. Morrison explained the situation, and the collector agreed to allow examination of the doll. In July 2019, Dr. Morrison, James Parker, and textile conservator Dr. Sarah Chen from Harvard University carefully examined the doll. The doll was in fair condition for 115+ years old. The porcelain head was intact. The cloth body showed wear and age, including the small tear that had been visible in the 1905 photograph. Dr. Chen carefully examined the tear under magnification. Through the opening, she could see layers of fabric and stuffing. And something else. A piece of cardstock or heavy paper, folded multiple times and pressed flat. With James Parker's permission, Dr. Chen carefully enlarged the tear just enough to extract the hidden item. Using tweezers, she pulled out a folded piece of cardboard, approximately 2 inches by 3 inches when unfolded. It was a photograph. A Victorian carte de visite, a small photograph mounted on cardboard, popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in America. The photograph showed a young girl, approximately 8 to 9 years old, with dark hair, wearing a white dress, sitting formally for a portrait. Written on the back in ink, Elizabeth Parker, age 9, February 1903. This was Elizabeth, Mary's sister, the original owner of the doll, photographed 1 month before her death in March 1903. But there was something wrong with the photograph. Elizabeth's face showed visible marks, small red-purple spots, petechiae, around her eyes and upper cheeks, faint bruising on the left side of her neck. A tense, strained expression rather than the relaxed face typical of Victorian portraits. Dr. Morrison consulted with forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Roberts at Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Roberts examined the photograph carefully and concluded, "The marks visible on this child's face and neck are consistent with asphyxiation, specifically manual strangulation or smothering. The petechiae are caused by burst capillaries when airflow is cut off. The neck bruising suggests pressure applied to that area. The child's expression shows distress rather than calm. This photograph shows a child who was recently subjected to attempted or actual asphyxiation." But wait, the photograph was dated February 1903. Elizabeth died in March 1903. Why would a photograph from 1 month before her death show signs of asphyxiation? Dr. Morrison researched further. She found Sarah Parker's letters in Massachusetts Historical Society archives. The letters from late 1902 and early 1903 documented Sarah's increasing frustration with Elizabeth. Then, suddenly, after March 1903, Sarah's letters changed tone. She wrote about feeling relieved, about how peaceful the household had become with only Mary to care for. The horrifying conclusion, the photograph of Elizabeth, showing signs of asphyxiation, was taken after Sarah had already attempted to harm her, possibly a previous attempt at suffocation that Elizabeth survived. 1 month later, in March 1903, Sarah succeeded. And Sarah, perhaps feeling guilt or documenting what she'd done, placed Elizabeth's photograph inside Elizabeth's doll and gave the doll to Mary, hiding evidence of what she'd done inside a child's toy. After discovering the hidden photograph showing signs of asphyxiation, researchers reconstructed what likely happened to Elizabeth Parker in early 1903. The timeline: February 1903. Elizabeth had her photograph taken. The photograph shows petechiae and neck bruising consistent with recent asphyxiation. This suggests Sarah Parker had attempted to smother or strangle Elizabeth, but Elizabeth survived. Perhaps Sarah stopped, or someone interrupted, or Elizabeth fought back successfully. After this incident, Sarah had the photograph taken, possibly as documentation, possibly as a memorial if she was planning to try again, possibly as evidence she could claim showed Elizabeth had been ill if anyone questioned marks on Elizabeth's body. March 1st to 14th, 1903. Elizabeth continued living at home. Sarah's letters from this period are sparse, but the tone is dark. The situation with Elizabeth remains intolerable. I see no resolution except through divine intervention. March 15th, 1903. Elizabeth died. Official cause: sudden fever. Reality: Sarah Parker smothered Elizabeth during the night, likely using a pillow, waiting until Elizabeth stopped breathing, then calling the doctor in the morning, claiming Elizabeth had died of fever. Dr. Henry Morrison, the family physician, examined Elizabeth's body, but didn't notice or didn't report any suspicious signs. Either the marks had faded since the February incident, or Dr. Morrison didn't look carefully, or he looked but chose not to question a grieving mother's account. Elizabeth was buried quickly, as was common in 1903. No autopsy was performed. The death was recorded as natural. March-April 1903. Sarah took Elizabeth's doll, placed the February photograph inside the doll's cloth body through a small opening, sewed it shut, and gave the doll to Mary. Sarah told Mary the doll was a special gift from Elizabeth, a way to remember her sister. Why did Sarah hide the photograph inside the doll? Possible reasons. 1. Guilt. She couldn't destroy the photograph but couldn't display it either. 2. Documentation. Preserving evidence of what she'd done, perhaps for confession, or as insurance. 3. Memorial, keeping Elizabeth's image close but hidden. 4. Concealment. Hiding the photograph where nobody would find it, and question the marks. Mary cherished the doll for the rest of her childhood and kept it through adulthood. She never knew it contained her sister's photograph. She never knew the photograph showed evidence of attempted murder. She never knew her mother had killed her sister. Sarah Parker died in 1934 at age 62. Her death certificate listed cause as heart disease. She never confessed to killing Elizabeth. Letters written in her final years show no remorse or admission. Robert Parker, Sarah's husband, died in 1928. There's no evidence he ever suspected Sarah of killing Elizabeth. His letters after Elizabeth's death describe grief but no suspicion. Mary Parker lived to 1978. She kept the doll her entire life, treasuring it as her connection to Elizabeth. In her old age, she told her daughter, "This was your Aunt Elizabeth's doll. She died when I was very small. Having her doll made me feel close to her." Mary died not knowing the doll contained evidence of murder. The truth remained hidden for 114 years, sealed inside a child's toy, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see what Victorian American families had concealed. That sudden fever sometimes meant something far darker, that some deaths weren't natural, and that evidence of infanticide could be hidden in the most innocent-seeming places, inside a doll held lovingly by an unsuspecting child. After discovering the hidden photograph and determining Elizabeth Parker had likely been murdered by her mother Sarah in 1903, Dr. Rebecca Morrison faced a question. What to do with this information? Elizabeth died 116 years ago. Sarah died 85 years ago. Everyone directly involved was long dead. There could be no prosecution, no justice in a legal sense. But there were living descendants, James Parker and others, who deserved to know the truth about their family history. Dr. Morrison contacted James Parker with her findings in August 2019. James was shocked, but after reviewing the evidence, accepted the conclusion. "It's horrifying," James said, "but it explains things we never understood. Why my family never talked much about Elizabeth's death. Why there were so few records. Why the family seemed to have gaps in the early 1900s. They were hiding something. Or someone was." Dr. Morrison published her findings in the Journal of American History in October 2019. The article, titled "Hidden Evidence: Victorian American Memorial Dolls and the Concealment of Infanticide," used Elizabeth Parker's case, with James's permission, as an example of how Victorian American families concealed child deaths, how diagnostic limitations allowed suspicious deaths to go uninvestigated, and how physical evidence could remain hidden for over a century. The article included the 1905 photograph of Mary with the doll, enhanced images showing the tear and hidden photograph, the extracted photograph of Elizabeth showing asphyxiation signs, Sarah Parker's letters documenting frustration with Elizabeth, medical analysis of the petechiae and bruising, historical context on Victorian American infanticide. The story attracted media attention. PBS produced a short documentary. The Boston Globe ran an article. "The Doll That Hid a Murder. Victorian Child's Toy Contained Evidence of Infanticide for 114 Years." The story resonated because it illuminated several dark truths. 1. Victorian American child deaths often went uninvestigated. 2. Mothers struggling with difficult circumstances sometimes killed their children. 3. Doctors often accepted parental explanations without scrutiny. 4. Evidence of crimes could remain hidden for generations. 5. Family secrets could persist through silence and concealment. Morrison worked with Boston Historical Societies to create a memorial for Elizabeth Parker. In March 2020, 117 years after Elizabeth's death, a small memorial ceremony was held at Forest Hills Cemetery, where Elizabeth is buried. James Parker spoke. Elizabeth Parker was 9 years old when she died. For 117 years, we believed she died of natural illness. Now we know she was murdered by her own mother. We cannot change that. We cannot prosecute anyone. But we can acknowledge Elizabeth's life and death honestly. Elizabeth was a spirited, strong-willed child who frustrated her mother. She deserved better than she got. She deserved to grow up. She deserved justice. We can't give her justice, but we can give her truth and remembrance. A new memorial plaque was placed at Elizabeth's grave. Elizabeth Parker, 1894 to 1903, died age 9. For 117 years, her death was attributed to sudden fever. Modern analysis revealed she was murdered. Her photograph, hidden inside a doll for 114 years, bore witness to what had been concealed. May her memory honor all children failed by those who should have protected them. The doll is now preserved at the Boston Children's Museum, displayed alongside the photograph of Mary holding it and the hidden photograph of Elizabeth. The exhibit is titled Hidden Evidence: Victorian American Childhood and Concealed Crimes. Sometimes what appears adorable in a photograph conceals horror. Sometimes a child's toy contains evidence of murder. Sometimes truth hides for generations inside innocent objects, waiting for technology or chance to reveal what families buried. And sometimes a Victorian memorial doll, given from mother to daughter as a gift of remembrance, was actually a repository for guilt, evidence, and secrets too dark to speak aloud. Elizabeth Parker died at age 9, killed by her mother, buried as a victim of fever, forgotten for 117 years. A hidden photograph inside a doll finally told the truth. Sometimes justice is impossible, but truth eventually emerges, even 114 years later, even from inside a child's toy. Elizabeth Parker's memorial and the Victorian Memorial Doll exhibit are at the Boston Children's Museum. Learn more about Victorian American childhood and historical crimes at bostonchildrensmuseum.org. Subscribe for more hidden truths revealed through historical objects.